everyone, welcome to HSC Trial Revision's 8 Notes lectures. I hope we are all doing really well and having a lovely holiday so far, or rather having a lovely start to the holidays. Welcome to the lectures. Now, before I begin, I'd just like to, introduce you guys to all the resources we have to offer here at 8 Notes to help you achieve your very best. We've got study notes available on our website, lectures obviously running this week, so attend all the ones that are relevant to you. We also have discussion forums, videos, newsletters, ADA calculator, which will be helpful down the path, and different articles as well. So, and lots more on our website, so definitely check that out. And we also have some more resources if you want a bit of extra push. So these are our paid resources, including TuteSmart, which is our online tutoring resource, and I am a tutor here at TuteSmart, so I tutor PDHPE, Biology and English Advanced. We also have a range of study guides to help you, like the to the point, straight, they're amazing, and I say that because I've used them in year 12. And we've got Ed Unlimited, which is like a Netflix for all of our study guides. So it's a great place, with all your study guides in one place, lots of topic tests as well for a range of different subjects, past papers. We've got NEPA past papers and obviously our own topic tests as well, and also text guides for English, which are amazing. And again, say that because I've used them, and if you are looking for that bit of extra help, they're amazing resources to check out. So before we get started, you'll find the slides that I'm using today in the resources section where you're streaming this video, just below. You will also be able to access the recording after the lecture just on this page, and you're also able to access past recordings as well. So today we are going to essentially focus on revision. Please ask any questions that you may have. If you've got questions about Core 1, Core 2, any of the, for the electives, sports med, any of the electives that I can help you out with, feel free to ask any questions. So today, before we go ahead, my name is Aditi. I graduated in 2021 as Dux with an ADA of 95, and got band 6s in English Extension, Advanced, PD and Biology, and I'm currently studying a Bachelor of Science and Advanced Studies in Medical Science at the University of Sydney as a Deliol Scholar, and specifically I am majoring in Medical Sciences and Political Economy. So if you have any questions related to that, to uni, to degrees, to maybe if you're interested in something like Bachelor of Science or Medical Science, feel free to ask away. And generally love reading, good shows, sunny days. Today is a sunny day, lovely in fact. And that's just a little image of my classics collection, just that first, I mean, I guess that's Emma, oh my goodness, Jane Austen's, I think, Sense and Sensibility, and what's the other one? It's like 2 in 1, but anyways, so yes, that's my little classics collection. These books are obviously not part of the classics, but they are amazing nonetheless. And a huge Harry Potter fan. That's why Harry Potter's up there, because I love it. So let's get started with what we are going to be doing today. Today we are specifically focusing on factors affecting performance, Core 2. So we've gone through Core 1. Last series revision was Core 1, and also we looked at specifically like the 2 dot points from sports medicine. So today we are going to go through factors affecting performance and how to smash trials, and also look at skills as well. So again, please feel free to ask any questions. So yeah, today we will be looking at the most important syllabus dot points of factors affecting performance, and the I guess our goal here is to help you move beyond to help you with content, to help you achieve a certain, or set you on the successful path to achieve a certain mark that you have in mind. So please feel free to ask any questions as we go along. So the first dot point that we're looking at is how does training affect performance? So we need to have a good understanding of three energy systems that our body uses. The first one is the ATP-PC system. So the creatine phosphate is the source of fuel in the system. It is a very efficient rate of ATP production. There's limited duration, so this system will only last us about 8 to 12 seconds because creatine phosphate runs out really fast. And once PC, so that's creatine phosphate, or it can also be called phosphocreatine. So it can be CP or PC, doesn't matter. Once it runs out, that's where fatigue comes in, and the heat is the byproduct of this system. Generally takes about 2 minutes recovery, so the recovery is pretty fast. And essentially, sports that use the ATP system is like, for example, 100-meter sprint. The fastest time recorded for a 100-meter sprint is 9 seconds, if I'm not wrong. And yeah, so this is where that system is used. Generally 100 meters about, I think, 11 seconds. I'm not very sure on the statistics there, but yeah, about 10-11 seconds. So it's very fast, and ATP PC is the one that we use here. Lactic acid system. So both ATP PC and lactic acid system, they're both anaerobic systems. So anaerobic means that they do not require oxygen to work. They do not require oxygen to actually produce energy. ATP is energy. That is the energy that our body uses. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. You don't necessarily need to know that, but if you want to, that's what ATP means. And the lactic acid system uses carbohydrates as its source of fuel. It is very efficient. It produces lots of ATP, and it can last us between 30 seconds to 3 minutes. And essentially, there is a buildup of lactic acid in the system, as suggested by the name, and that can actually cause the fatigue. There is recent research into it to see, that's researching if actually that is the case, but for the that's still a study, like different studies that are going on to check that out. But that is something, that for the sake of the HSC, we can say that indeed it's the lactic acid which is the cause of fatigue. And recovery takes about half an hour to an hour, so it's not a very long recovery process either, but obviously it's longer than ATP PC. So examples include the reason why we're using carbohydrates in the lactic acid system is because we are breaking down the carbs to get glucose, and glucose is essentially the energy producing factor in here. So different sports that require it, for example, it can include repeated tackles in rugby that might be using the lactic acid system, or in tennis if you're running back and forward. But then again, that would be for the first couple of minutes, and then we sort of start seeing that integration between the lactic acid and aerobic system. And also the 400-meter run would be using the lactic acid system. So the aerobic system, this system is very efficient. It's the most efficient, but the rate of ATP production is medium, and it can't control, it can't quite cope with the higher intensity exercises. So this is where we kind of we're focused on medium intensity. So for example, your marathon runners, they're using the aerobic system. So the goal is to achieve endurance, so to endure the whole, however long the marathon is, not to actually be the fastest at it, rather at the beginning. You never see marathon runners sort of shoot off at the beginning and just run really fast, because it's about endurance, and the aerobic system is perfect for that. So it's using carbs and fats for fuel production, and essentially the process in which the body switches from using carbs and glucose to start using fats instead to make glucose is called hitting the wall. So this is where the carb stores have sort of run out. We can't use carbohydrates as glucose anymore, or as glucose store anymore. So we actually need to shift to fats, and that is called hitting the wall. This system can last for hours, and it's really, really efficient. It can last for hours. Fatigue occurs when carbs are depleted and fat actually becomes the fuel source, and that's, you know, after hitting the wall that we sort of start to see the fatigue. The byproduct are water, so sweat, oxygen, and carbohydrates, and the recovery is longer, so it can, depending on the event, like it can take between 12 to 48 hours. Examples include marathon running, it can include Ironman challenges, and also swimming, so longer swimming tournaments. So training methods. There are 4 types of training methods, and you should be able to assess these methods and type. So in anaerobic training, firstly, we've got the anaerobic interval, and this is where it goes on for short duration. The recovery is limited, so we don't actually, you know, take a lot of rest in between. It is high intensity, so you're going in excess of 85% of your maximum heart rate, and it can last up to, each time you're lasting up to like 2 minutes. So for example, we've got a 100-meter sprint, and then a 45-second rest. So after every 100-meter sprint, you get 45 seconds to rest, and you do this 10 times overall. So that will obviously also help you build up your lactic acid your tolerance rather, and this is suited for sports that have high intensity outbursts, so like futsal or netball, where or you know, even soccer, where you're just jogging and then you need to start running really fast. It's for those types of sport to create that endurance and stamina. Aerobic, so that's the first one, anaerobic, so just anaerobic interval. Now the second type of training that we're looking at, or the methods that we're looking at, are aerobic methods. So aerobic interval is when you've got sessions that alternate between work and recovery. There is the process, like the principle of overload. So every time we want to overload and we want to be better, and we want to, you know, sort of push past that threshold as well. It is best suited for sports that have extended periods of work following periods of rest, like netball, basketball, and the levels of training here are adjustable, and again, that also depends on your own fitness levels. So for example, you could be running a 1500 meters at 80%, and then jogging for 400 meters at 40% times 5. So 80% here refers to maximum heart rate. So you're running like 80% of your maximum heart rate, you know, running 1500 meters, and then you take a slow jog at 40% of your maximum heart rate for 400 meters, and you repeat the cycle 5 times. That's aerobic interval. There is an alternating session of work and recovery. Now circuit type of training, that includes various activities that are normally done for a set period of time before you move on to the next. So this is where you've, as the name suggests, like a circuit, so there's a bit of range and variety in this one, and it is suitable for multiple types of activities like iron challenge and marathons and triathlons, so you know, events or competitions in which you're doing multiple activities, and there's that constant adjustment as well. So for example, you know, you could be 5 minutes on a bike, then 5 minutes running, and then swimming for 5 minutes. And this is where we are developing our aerobic capacity. That is sort of the key here. Continuous aerobic is essentially when we are giving constant effort, like you're going, you're going to the full of your ability, to the best of your ability, for 20 minutes to 2 hours. There are no rest period. The activity is the same, so it can become a bit monotonous, and the intensity is also the same. So examples can include running at a set speed on a flat treadmill, which actually replicates running a marathon, and this is suited for all fitness levels, and it also improves your overall fitness level as well. However, fartlek, on the other hand, is known as, also you can call it speed play, because this is where you're doing a single activity with random varying activities. For example, this is the sort of activities that you do in, like, for example, pre-season, where you're focusing on aerobic capacity, endurance training, strength training as well. For example, fast twitch muscle response. So it's best suited to sports with frequent changes in intensity, again, like soccer. Examples can include running at 12 kilometers per hour for the entire session, but then raising the incline treadmill from 2 degrees to like 8 degrees to 0 degrees. So there's that variation that's not monotonous, unlike continuous. Okay, flexibility training. So there are 4 types of flexibility training. The first one is ballistic. Now this is where we are conducting repeated movements such as swinging or bouncing to gain extra stretches, or to gain extra stretch. And the muscle is deliberately pushed behind the normal range of motion. So what we're doing here, what we're focusing on here is the ability to move our muscles and joints through their normal and complete range of motion. And essentially this is going to help us reduce injury levels and also decrease muscle stiffness as well, and most suited for sports that require bouncing, that require that sort of reaching good levels of stretch and being that extra momentum as well, like gymnastics or kicking and AFL. And examples can include hamstring bounce as well. Now, remember also with something like ballistic stretching, and stretching in general, it is done often, especially at higher levels, and athletes would focus a lot more on it as well once they sort of like it becomes a bigger focus once athletes start to age, because with age your muscles get stiffer, and so yeah, for aged athletes especially, it's quite important to really focus on flexibility as well. Otherwise, it can then, if you don't do that, if you don't warm up adequately and you don't stretch, you're more susceptible to injuries as well. So dynamic training looks at movements that take joints through their normal range of motion to produce temporal stretches. So often it's done as a warm-up, and it replicates movements of the game of all sports. So yeah, for example, in soccer or netball you can do walking lunges. So it's kind of mirroring, again, focusing on that leg strength that you'll need and the endurance throughout the duration of the game. PNF, this is where we're doing static stretching and also isometric stretch with resistance. So, with for example, we can do it with another person or use an object, like for example, a resistance band, or maybe something like a physical object like a training bag or something. And this is where we are taking this is used in sports that take the joints beyond the active range of motions, like hockey, rugby, and we're also focusing on extra stretch. And this is used in rehab. So after an injury, you could be using PNF stretching as a way to recover. Static stretching is this is where we're doing slow stretch to a point for 30 seconds, and this is the most common one. This is also the most safe out of all of them. Like ballistic would be the least safe, I would say. And it is most common, so static is most common. It assists in rehab, and the point here is that we kind of want to extend the muscle just so much so that we can stretch it without actually having any pain. So for example, a deltoid stretch. Okay, so strength training. Now elastic, so we can use elastic, so use various forms of elastic to provide the resistance to develop strength and Resistance actually also increases elastic stretches, resistance increases as the elastic stretches, and it can be added to any exercise. So you can sort of do it like part of any warm-up, and it's good for rehab. It is good for a smaller muscle use. It's better suited for that, like rather than to try and do muscular hypertrophy using elastic stretching or resistance bands. You can focus on smaller muscle movements using resistance bands and elastic. So things like javelin, arm wrestling, where you focus on a certain set of muscles. Fixed refers to machines that lift weights through a pulley system. So dominant form of resistance training when a large stretch gains or large resistance is desired. So this is where you're kind of focusing on a lot of different muscles, like a large set of muscles. Like for example, if you're doing pull-ups with the presses, for example, a leg press or something, or even the pull, like the one where you do like it's kind of like a pull-up, but it's with the fixed machine. So something like that, you know, with that you're focusing development in your biceps, your triceps, your deltoids, your back as well, your lats. So they are better for, like, you know, they're better for targeting a range of muscles. So it helps with techniques, and it also helps us achieve full range of motion with equal resistance. So for example, leg press, Smith machine as well. Now, free weights, these do not take up so much space, so you don't have to, you know, get like a whole machine. They're more convenient, and they allow body to develop stabilizing muscles. So you lift a certain weight against gravity to train specific group of muscles, and examples include dumbbells, barbells, kettlebells, and plates. Finally, hydraulics machines. So these use this is where we're using machines with air and water compression to actually provide resistance throughout the movement, and quick movements lead to larger resistance. So for example, rowing or cable machines, or using an arm ergometer as well. Okay, let's have a look at the principles of training. So every time we train, you know, there's obviously has to be a purpose for it, and our principles for training want us to, and these principles have to be applied to our training in order to continuously improve our training. So reversibility is when, if your training stops, all gains are lost. Right, so this is called the detraining effect. Now, yeah, like for example, if you don't use it, you lose it, that kind of thing. So generally lost at a similar rate that they are gained, and there are more. So the more adaptations you have, the more you have to lose. So for example, if you're training, you know, you're doing a lot of strength training, and then you stop doing strength training, you can lose the muscular hypertrophy that you've been seeing. So the changes in your muscle, in the size of your muscles, you can see that, like, you know, if it has increased, you've been doing strength training and then you stop for a while, there can be a decrease in that. And so we want to maintain that. You know, you may not be able to add on to, you may not be able to train as much so that you can continue increasing, but you can maintain it with some level of training. So reversibility can be seen 4 to 6 weeks after stopping aerobic training, and we can maintain this by aerobic training of 70% heart rate and doing it for 3 times per week. So we can see reversibility 2 weeks post stopping resistance training, and we can maintain it by doing 1 session per week of previous intensity. So even if you can't commit to like continuing it, you still want to be able to maintain it. Specificity. Now, the training has to be specific to a sport. That intuitively makes sense. And you know, your training has to target specific aspects of the sport. So best gains are made when the training mirrors the sports. And in aerobic training, the pace and environment should reflect competition. For example, a swimmer swims. Right, a swimmer cannot become better at swimming by running. Like, sure, it can help with like aerobic endurance, but it's not going to help them become a better swimmer. So, for example, with resistance training, muscle groups used in so we want to focus on developing muscle groups that are used in sport. Obviously, you want the overall body fitness, but still you are placing emphasis on muscles that you are using in the training. So a swimmer would use lat pull downs to replicate the pulling movement at a swimming speed. So variety is the next one. Now that makes sense, right? We don't want to get bored from training. We don't want to hate training because you have to do the same thing every time. So doing a variety of different exercises and using different machines and so on, that can help prevent boredom, and it can also help with your mental well-being, because you know, you don't want to be bored from doing your training. You don't you don't want it to feel like a chore every time you do it. So, the two are quite closely related, and it maintains motivation as well, so that you want to come back and actually do it. Now, aerobic, changing from fartlek to, so in aerobic, we see variety when we change from fartlek training to continuous for running. Or with resistance training, we go from free, fixed or elastic, or hydraulics for chest press. So we're sort of changing every time and doing, targeting the same muscle group but doing it in different ways. Okay, so what are the physiological adaptations that happen as a result of training? So we've got stroke volume. There's changes to the stroke volume. So the amount of blood that is pumped out of the heart per liter is the stroke volume, and stroke volume increases from training. So you should know all of these different terms. You should know the what each one of them is, and be able to actually talk through what are the physiological adaptations that occur as training. That is all part of the right hand side of the syllabus. Even with this question, like for example, you can be asked, like and I think there have been some HSC questions that have asked something similar, is for example, how can a soccer player apply the principles of training in their training regime? So you want to know each one and be able to talk about them and give examples for them. So stroke volume refers to the amount of blood that is pumped out of the heart per liter, and it increases from training. So it allows for the same amount of blood to be pumped around the body with fewer contractions. So this is basically when, after training, you are essentially getting fitter, right? And your body and your heart is able to pump out more blood with fewer contractions. So that is what an increase in stroke volume refers to. Cardiac output refers to the amount of blood which is pumped out of the heart per minute. So the difference between stroke volume and cardiac output is that stroke volume is the amount of blood that is pumped out per liter, and then cardiac output is blood that is pumped out per minute. And essentially it increases from training, and that is a direct result of stroke volume as well. So if you are able to, for example, if you're able to pump out more blood with fewer contractions, that would also mean that you're able to pump out more blood per minute. So as a result of that, we can see how stroke volume and cardiac output are related. And cardiac output also allows for faster and more efficient blood transportation. So once an increase so it increases from training, and we see that the process becomes more faster and efficient as well. Oxygen uptake. So as the name suggests, oxygen uptake refers to the body's ability to absorb oxygen through the lungs and into the blood, and it increases from training as well, allows for faster and more efficient oxygen delivery to working muscles. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. No question is a silly question. Okay, so let's have a look at some more physiological adaptations. So lung capacity. Now lung capacity is basically the lung size, and lung size does not change from training. So that is something to keep in mind. There could be a little change, if any at all, but generally we don't see a change in the size of your lungs. But the vital capacity, so the air that you breathe out after deep breaths, that increases slightly as a result of training. And the residual volume, which is the air that cannot be moved out of the lung, that decreases slightly. So that means, so when you breathe out, like, there's still some air that's left in there that can't be moved out, but if you are training, that will decrease slightly. Tidal volume, that refers to the air which is breathed in and out during your normal respirations. When you're normally just breathing in and out, not doing any deep breaths or anything, that's your tidal volume. And the tidal volume is unchanged during rest and submaximal exercise. It kind of remains the same. Hemoglobin levels, on the other hand, hemoglobin is the molecule that binds with O2 and transports oxygen around the body. transports it around the blood and then, you know, through that to the body, and it increases as a result of training. So it elevates the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood, and as a result of that, you're able to maintain higher intensity thresholds. So if you've got more oxygen going around to your body because there's more hemoglobin present in your blood, so remember, the oxygen can latch onto the hemoglobin, it can travel around more, and so obviously that is going to lead to you being able to maintain high intensity threshold. The resting heart rate is the beats per minute at rest, aka, you know, the sleeping heart rate, for example. And as a result of training, the resting heart rate should decrease. So this is where like your elite athletes would have, like, I think an average resting heart rate of, like, I think 40 to 50 beats per minute in compare, or even, and I think even like 30 to 40 beats per minute as well. The resting heart rate of a normal person is around 70, 80. If I'm not wrong, I think 70 is up there, 70 to 80. So it happens because of an increase in the stroke volume and because of an increase in the hemoglobin level as well. So because you are pumping out more blood with fewer contractions, you don't need as many contractions, you don't need as many beats to actually send out that blood, and you also have more hemoglobin present to which oxygen can latch onto, and you can send more oxygen around your body. And so that is then got, and so you don't need, so yeah, because of the higher rate of hemoglobin in the blood and you being able to pump out more blood, that is going to cause a decrease in heart rate, and both of them will increase as a result of training. So heart rate will decrease, and heart does not have to contract as much to meet the, you know, metabolic needs. That is why we see the heart rate decrease, because because as an athlete we are becoming more efficient in our stroke volume, and also in increasing our hemoglobin levels. Awesome, let's move on then. So further physiological adaptations include muscular hypertrophy. So muscular hypertrophy is basically when you've got as a result of training, there is an increase in the cross-sectional area of muscle. So there's an increase in the size of your muscles. So after you do, like, for example, if you've been doing resistance training for long, you would have bigger muscles than someone who doesn't do resistance training, for example. And that is because there's an increase in the muscle tissue, and the fancy word here is myofibrillis. So myofibrillis is the component which is actually responsible for muscular contraction. Now, the larger the myofibrillis, the larger the myochondria. So those are your muscle cells, and and they can actually lead to your muscles producing more force as well. So ultimately, muscular hypertrophy will increase as a result of strength training, and it will cause an increase in muscular endurance and strength as well. So if you've got bigger muscles, you'll have more strength and more endurance too. Looking at fast twitch muscle fibers now. So the effect on fast twitch fibers as a result of training, fast twitch fibers are your white fibers. That is because the blood supply is very low and they don't have much mitochondria either. So white muscle fibers, they take a shorter time to reach peak force and they fatigue faster. So someone who is, for example, a marathon runner, someone who is a 100-meter sprint runner, they would have a high proportion of fast twitch muscles in comparison to red twitch muscles, because fast twitch muscles, so there's no change to the percentage of fast twitch muscles. It is sort of generally what you have, and some muscles would have more fast twitch than slow twitch fibers. Some muscles would have it the other way around. So for example, your calf muscles would generally have more fast twitch than slow twitch fibers, they would have slow twitch fibers more than fast twitch fibers generally, and for both of them, there's after training, there is no change to the percentage of fast twitch fibers. So the opposite of that is our slow twitch fibers. Now, these are red fibers that actually sustain force for an extended period of time, but cannot generate a significant amount of force. So no change to the percentage of slow twitch fibers as a result of training. And increased use of slow twitch fibers will actually lead to increased muscle efficiency and larger aerobic thresholds. So that's why your calf muscles would have more fast twitch fibers, because you need to, stand, for example, if you are like working or at school as well, if you have to like move around all day, and generally if you're standing up all day moving around, you will have more fast twitch muscle fibers, so that they can be sustained for that long. Okay, now that brings us to the second dot point. How can psychology affect performance? So motivation. Now, motivation refers to the reason why an individual behaves in a certain way, and what is sort of driving them to achieve to behave a certain way in order to maybe achieve a goal. So there are 4 types of motivation that we will look at. There is intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is personalized, so that means it comes from within. It is your own goals, your own desire, for example, to be the best, your own mindset that is leading you to act a certain way. Extrinsic, on the other hand, comes from outside. So reward provides more satisfaction than the task itself. So you are sort of like for example, you may want to succeed for parents, for money, for praise, for coaches, for more fan following or more public interest, whatever it is. So this is where it's less so your personal instinct, but rather, it's more about the outside. You wanting to maybe impress other people. So positive motivation is performance that is specifically driven for rewards. You're doing for the good things that would come as a result, like rewards or praises as well. And negative is driven when you maybe doing something out of fear, or like not being able to achieve a certain goal, the consequences of that, or being unable to meet the expectations. So motivation can be for example, it can be intrinsic or extrinsic, and it can be positive or negative. So there can be, say for example, if you're motivated by your own desire to achieve something and make your family proud, and receive their praise, that is intrinsic positive motivation. However, if you are motivated by wanting to become, 2 times Grand Slam champion or something, right? And you're doing it because if you don't, then you could be, then you may not be able to enter another championship. I don't know, that not very likely, because you're not stopped from entering the championship if you don't win the other one. But let's just say right now that's it. That's extrinsic negative. So you can have multiple choice questions which ask you to define things as intrinsic negative, intrinsic positive, or extrinsic positive, extrinsic negative as well. Okay, so psychological processes that are characterized by fear, worry, or the concern about certain situations, that is anxiety. And there are 2 types of anxiety that we need to look at. And the right hand side of the syllabus wants you to distinguish between trait and state anxiety, and for example, talk about the differences between the 2, how one may arise, how one may be better than the other as well. So trait anxiety is anxiety that is individualized. It's something that you may generally be very anxious all the time. So it's evident in daily activities like nail biting, sweating, increased heart rate. State anxiety is when it develops as a result of for example, like as a result of a certain situation. For example, you are playing a big match and you are anxious then, so it is, so yes, you may have anxiety when you're playing, when you're in the middle of a game, but then it stops after the game. That is state anxiety. And a good example of that is, for example, when you're doing a penalty shootout in soccer. So I kind of like to think of it, for example, trait anxiety as being like a trait. It's your trait. You're always anxious. That's trait anxiety. Versus state anxiety, which is when you're in a certain state, when you're in a certain state or mood, that, or in a certain situation. That is where state anxiety arises. Okay, so sources of stress. Now, stress is a psychological response that the body produces through cortisol, and cortisol is the hormone that is responsible for like your fight or flight response. So if you, and basically does that by increasing your glucose levels in your body when you are in a flight or flight response situation. So yeah, and it's a stress hormone. Essentially, it is stress is a psychological response in response to the demand placed on the body. And symptoms can include muscle tightening, it can include increased heart rate, increased breathing rate, and also headaches. So it can occur via personalized pressure. The athlete themselves can, have like internalized pressure, competition pressure as a result of matches or opponents, social pressure, so family, friends, coaches, and finally physical pressure like playing under game pressure. So optimum arousal is when the level that refers to the level of excitement and readiness for a sport. So essentially the exact point to perform at the best. And if you have, so if you are too aroused, or or not as aroused, or too anxious and not as anxious, like you don't care too much, that can sort of be the that can sort of throw you off balance, that can affect performance. So it is specific to the sport, but this is what we see, that this is the best area of performance. This is called the inverted U hypothesis, that we are peaking here at the U, just at like the convex here, the concave here of the U, and this is where you've got boredom, low pressure, and this is where you are very stressed, you're very anxious, and you're very unhappy. So the best bit, like the best part of the U to be at, is the middle, because this is where you are still caring about the game, like you still will have pressure, but it's not to the point where the pressure is clouding your ability to play. So Mark Viduka, the world's best striker at the time, missed a penalty shot because he was too aroused. He was over here, so the high bit here. So performance goes low when you are too aroused, too anxious. Adrian Morley was sent off after his first tackle of rugby because he was too aroused. Again, being too nervous, too anxious, and just too aroused. That can actually also really lead to can have a really significant effect on your performance. Okay, so psychological strategies. How do we enhance motivation and reduce anxiety? So this is where we look at different strategies to help reduce anxiety. So concentration is first. So concentration is when we are obviously, we want to gain that ability to focus on the task on hand, not focus about any other thoughts, any other feelings, any other anxieties. And meditation can help with that. It can help you feel present in the moment, and it can counteract anxiety. So sports like, for example, diving and golf, they require high concentration. So Mike Hussey, who is a cricketer, was a cricketer, played a while back, he used to watch the ball to get him concentrated because he was a batter. So he would really just focus on the ball itself and just focus on that rather than the crowd around him, other team members, or the opposite teams members around him. Mental rehearsal, on the other hand, is when we are using techniques like visualization or imagery, and we are essentially picturing executing an activity or emotion. So you kind of see it happen beforehand, and that improves motor skill coordination. It can also allow you to sort of visualize a successful outcome, and if you feel like you're going to succeed, more than likely you will succeed. And yeah, it improves concentration. Vivid, realistic imagery movements can be really helpful. So like being fully in the sense, like for example, if you feel like, for example, you're in a cricket match, you know, you're I don't know, you're in the last over, you need 10 runs to, well, let's go a bit more. Let's go, you need 12 runs to win in the over, right? And so in a moment like that, you maybe before you came to play, you sort of knew you might be in this sort of situation where you have to finish the match. So doing a sensory practice, you know, feeling the crowd around you, for example, cheer on for you, feeling the ball hit the bat every time in the perfect position so that you can score a boundary, or you can, you know, at least get some runs. Like that sort of sensory imagery can really help. It is used by athletes in gymnastics. It can also be used in weightlifting, for example, where you are, you know, you are visualizing yourself lift in the moment. I don't know, you can feel the coldness of the bar, you can feel the weight trying to pull you down, you can feel people around you cheer, and then once you hold it there long enough and then you let go, you can hear the thunk of the weight, and that can be, you know, again, a very good visual cue to help you succeed then. And Missy Franklin, who was an Olympian swimmer, she used to visualize her swim to reduce anxiety. Yeah, not just in sports, even in real life. For example, in one of her interviews, Beyonce goes that every time, like some of her best performances, she's seen them happen before they have happened. So it's a really powerful technique. Okay, so relaxation techniques, of course, it's kind of similar, I guess, all of them in some ways or another, but relaxation techniques is when you want to be calm, you want to be present. We are focused on improving the overall well-being of the athlete. We want to decrease stress, anxiety, and also control arousal. So some examples include progressive muscular relaxation, mental relaxations, and controlled breathing to achieve that floating state, mental pictures, and also breathing techniques. Goal setting, on the other hand, provides direction and progress. There are 4 types. You can have a short-term goal to be achieved in the near future. So, for example, juggling a soccer ball for 200 times. You can have a long-term goal to be achieved, you know, in a longer period of time, like squatting 100 kgs by June next year. Behavioral, so improve through expectations and behaviors like getting up to train early. And finally, performance. This is something that is measurable. So a level of success, like getting an Olympic gold medal. So those are the 4 types of goal setting. You know, short-term, long-term, behavioral, and finally performance. Something that you can actually measure, something that is tangible to show that you have achieved a certain level. And you need all 4 types. You need to be using all 4 times over time to be successful. Okay, amazing. We're doing really well according to time. So how can nutrition and recovery strategies affect performance? This is the third dot point that we have to look at. Okay, so nutritional considerations. Firstly, we've got hydration. Now, before our performance, we want to be consuming 2 to 3 liters of water before event. And obviously, along with water, that can also include like energy drinks and stuff. So, so before event, 2 to 3 liters, 500 mils in the morning, and then 250 mils pre-performance. That's usually like, like I guess 45 minutes to an hour before. During the activity, we want to replenish the lost fluids. So every 20 minutes of the activity, you want to be drinking 200 to 300 mils of water, because you need that to obviously sustain you through the activity. Then post-performance, this is where we want to return the body to the pre-performance level. So remember, 150% of fluid loss to enable recovery. So what we need to every kilogram that is lost, you want to drink 1 liter of water for it in the recovery process. Food. So pre-performance, we want to be doing a process or undertaking a process called carb loading, and that is where 36 to 72 hours before the performance, we are eating high carbs before the event, and we are tapering. So tapering is a process in which we're not actually exercising or using up our glucose reserves. We are instead eating and not exercising to preserve our glycogen stores. Glycogen refers to glucose that is stored in the liver, and glycogen is basically like a molecule which has like 12 to 14 molecules of glucose attached to it. So when your body runs out of glucose, it breaks down glycogen and then obviously uses that as glucose. So now, in terms of food, so endurance athletes have to replenish, right? So they eat to replenish the body, and they also want to avoid hitting the wall. So we don't want that transition from using carbs to using fats. Instead, we want to replenish our bodies instead. And low GI carbs for a slower release of energy is also pretty beneficial. So, for example, fruit, they are low GI, they have lots of energy, but the release is slow in comparison to high GI foods that release glucose really fast. So each glycogen gram holds 2.6 grams of water. So essentially having high glycogen stores beforehand, which we sort of do with our food, can really help also with hydration. And then finally carbs intake. So carb intake is when we are consuming 50 to 100 grams in the first 2 hours, is essential for recovery after an event. High carbs like pepperoni pizza can help. Protein needs to be consumed for muscle repair. So the syllabus, the right hand side, can ask you questions regarding, for example, for you to create a during and post performance plan for like a specific athlete, and you want to have examples of it. So we're going to take 2 examples, a triathlon runner and a sprinter, and they're 2 very different because a sprinter is very quick event, like obviously quick in the sense that it's finished very fast in comparison to triathlon. So pre-performance, a triathlon runner, carb loading is essential for them, and 2 to 3 liters before an event. So 500 mils in the morning, 250 pre-performance. And because they are going to need that energy, triathlon runners, and obviously they can't, drink water to, they can't, obviously they can drink water every 20 minutes, but imagine someone who is running like in the Olympics or something. We kind of have to be very wise with the time that we're spending on it. So they may not be able to go 200 every time, but that's sort of the desired state, 200 to 300 mil. And they can also drink Gatorade and or water, so they can use both. And lollies can be used for a quick burst of energy, so very high in sugar, so you can use them. And post performance, they have to eat a meal which is high in carbohydrates to get the body back to their pre-event level, and 150% of fluid consumption for recovery. So that's for a triathlon runner. Now for a sprinter, they are going to use ATP-PC system. So that means they don't actually need their carb loading because it's not really going to help with anything. They're not going to use their aerobic system. So glycogen that they need is already stored. So they would have some water, so 500 mils of water, and a high GI carb before the game for quick use. So for example, some trail mix, for example. Now, during the sport, they can take small sips of sports drinks like Gatorade and small sips of water as well. But yeah, that one obviously depends on the distance, like a 400 meter, I would say, or 800 meter even, like that's where you'd probably maybe take a small sip, but generally we don't see that very often, but you can if there is a need to. And finally, post-performance protein-filled meals like burrito bowls to repair muscles, and 500 to 1 liter of water. So 500 mils to 1 liter of water, or 500 liters, obviously. Okay, so now let's have a look at supplementation and what is happening when it comes to supplementation. So, our body obviously needs nutrients from a diet, and they include firstly minerals. So, minerals are elements in the food that our body needs. For example, iron. Iron is responsible for hemoglobin, and it helps with the transportation of oxygen through the body. And calcium is important for bone health. So vitamins are inorganic compounds that maintain body function. So food is the main source here. Vitamin D helps the body absorb calcium, while vitamin C helps in the absorption of iron. So, both iron and calcium link to sports medicine. If that is one of the electives that you've looked at, we looked at it last in the last series lectures where we looked at 2 points from it, and we looked at how, for example, adult and age athletes and female athletes, they require um, high levels of iron and calcium in order to keep their bones strong, and yeah, to keep their bones strong. Really, that's the big one. So essentially, the reason that iron and calcium are important is that iron deficiency can cause the body to work slower. Women have a higher need of iron than men because we lose a lot of iron through menstruation, and supplementation would be beneficial for enduring training, right? So the right hand side of the syllabus will ask you whether or not you should be, whether or not you should be using supplementation. And that is a question that we need to consider. Like, a lot of the context of the question asks you, okay, we've got a female runner. She is in her mid 30s, 40s, so we know that her iron levels are going to probably, obviously her calcium and iron levels may not be that high, especially for women after menopause. Their bones become very brittle because of low levels of estrogen, and as a result of that, that's where supplementation can come in. But generally, supplementation can, like, it's not needed if you are already consuming plenty of foods that are actually high, for example, in iron and calcium that you need. So, for example, eating foods that are high in iron, like red meat, beans, leafy greens, like spinach, for example. Now, with calcium, it supports all people, especially the elderly, because calcium is important for the bones. If your bones don't have enough calcium, they're going to be brittle, which means that you have an increased chance of breaking a bone every time you fall. So, yeah, so essentially, supplementation is deemed necessary, again, if an individual consumes more calcium rich food. So, dairy products, almonds, and so on. Those are pretty good sources of calcium. Okay, supplementation now for proteins. So proteins are building blocks of tissues. Everything in your body, like most of the structures, they require proteins. So proteins are essential. Now, proteins can increase muscle size. So protein can increase muscle size and also the rate of recovery, and it can be increased via diet. But too much protein actually can cause calcium excretion through the urine, which can then cause osteoporosis. This is where, if you're getting enough protein from your diet, you don't want to consume supplements that are rich, like you don't want to consume protein supplements, and also because protein can also be stored in your kidneys, and it can also affect kidney function. So with something like protein, you want to know what the downsides are, that it can cause calcium excretion through urine, which can cause osteoporosis, and then in the kidneys it can be stored, and there it can enable, or yeah, no, it not yeah, it's not like it will directly interfere, but the concentration of it will then interfere with the kidney processes. So it's bad for your kidneys as well. So too much protein is bad. Too little is also bad. So we want that balance. Caffeine is a stimulant that can be taken in a tablet or liquid form. It enhances endurance, increases alertness and concentration. It can be dehydrating though, and it can also lead to increased arousal levels. So it can reduce fatigue, like I said. However, it can, if you are taking too much caffeine, it can actually also impair your fine motor skills, control, and technique. And over a long term, it can lead to difficulty in sleeping, and restlessness as well. So we don't want to take supplementation of that. And finally, creatine. Now, creatine is one that usually pops up a lot, especially when we are talking about like sprinters and stuff. So they may choose to take creatine supplementation, but creatine is, again, sourced through food and body cell production. It resynthesizes ATP faster. There's 5 to 8% uptake in the anaerobic capacity. It reduces muscle fatigue. It can cause cramps and muscle spasms, and it can also lead to water weight as well. So this is where we don't want to take excessive levels of creatine because of those symptoms there. It can lead to pulled muscles as well, but it's good for explosive momentum. It is good for explosive movement, but it's not good for, obviously, if you're already having enough creatine in your diet. You don't need that extra bit of creatine from supplements. So I'm just gonna plug in my charger. Amazing. And so I guess the moral of the story here is that while supplementation can help with aiding the body with deficiency that we are unable to restore with diet, for example, if you've got iron deficiency, for example, because if you're vegetarian or vegan and you can't restore that through eating like foods, generally meat, which is really high in iron levels, then it would sort of make sense that it cannot be restored with diet. So you may want to take supplementation for it, and you may want to take iron tablets. However, if your diet is already effective and the body's already getting the nutrients that it requires, there is no need to take those extras, to take the supplementation, because too much of those nutrients that we looked at can actually cause some really significant down effects that we don't want. So that's sort of the two arguments. But yeah, in a nutshell, you're saying that if you're already getting the nutrients that your body needs, you do not need to take supplementation. It is not necessary. Okay, now recovery strategies. So active recovery is considered the best type of recovery, and that is because it's crucial for preventing symptoms of overtraining. So there are we look at physiological and psychological strategies. So physiological strategies include cool down and reducing the heart rate, for example, and metabolism to pre-exercise state. So cool down generally can include 5 to 10 minutes of jogging. It can include static stretching. It can also include the use of compression garments, and cool down essentially leads to water dispersal and reduced delayed onset muscle soreness. So DOMS. Awesome. And nutritional plans. This is where we're focusing on fuel replenishment. So 600 mils of fluid for every 50 grams lost. That is calculated through your water weight and also your regular sips as well. And it is important to eat 30 minutes to 2 hours post-exercise to replenish those fuels. The ratio of carbs to protein is 4 to 1. So essentially, like for example, 10 to 20 grams of protein would then mean somewhere between 40 to 80 grams of carbs. Okay, neural strategies. So these are the ones where neural strategies focus on relieving the nervous system, and they help balance fatigue. So for example, rugby players need mental relaxation because of the number of tackles and collisions. So there are two ways in which we do this. So we've got hydrotherapy, which involves the use of water to actually soothe the pain, and we're also eliminating jarring movements and accelerating blood flow. So hot water immersion, cold water immersion, and also doing both of them. So contrast, so you are in the hot water immersion for 5 minutes or something, and no, actually 5 is probably too much, like 2 minutes or something, and then you switch over to cold, back to hot, back to cold, and so on. Massages are another one. So they help muscles relax by allowing them to stretch. It also increases flexibility, and it's good for lactic acid dispersal as well and muscle swelling. So there can be compression massages, and there are also trigger point massages as well. So tissue damage strategies. So cryotherapy is cold therapy. So this is used to treat injuries and speed up recovery. So ice is used quite significantly in this process because it slows down the tissue's inflammatory response, and it also prevents the buildup of waste. So you can use a damp cloth or cling wrap to around ice to actually avoid an ice burn, but you are essentially using ice on and off for like 10 minutes for up to 40 minutes. So so that in order to prevent the build up of waste, and also to slow down the inflammatory response. We can also use ice baths to speed up recovery. So this is where we are immersing the affected body parts or the whole body in an ice bath for a short period of time, for example 1 minute. And this is promoting vasoconstriction and vasodilation. So when you're in the cold, it's going to so your body is going to go into vasoconstriction in order to sort of go back to that normal temperature level, or to try to, right? Because you're in cold water, so you're not going to go back to your normal body temperature level, but your blood vessels will want to decrease in diameter because of the cold water. And when you get out the ice bath, and or if you're using ice just like generally, just generally on the injury area, then your blood vessels will dilate, so they will become bigger, and that is going to promote the blood vessels to deliver blood that is oxygen rich into all the muscles, and that actually stimulates recovery, the on and off of vasoconstriction and vasodilation. Okay, having a look at psychological strategies. So individualized relaxation techniques that calm the mind and the body. So that can include firstly hard training, and so after hard training and demanding performance, that can cause low concentration, lack of motivation, and increased anxiety. So performance evaluations are essentially debriefing sessions, and they should have positive feedback and reinforcements, and that's something that coaches have to do. They have to focus on the process of the softball on the softball game, for example, but not like the outcome. Obviously they would care about the outcome. Like, I think it'd be obviously it'd be wrong to say that they wouldn't care, but coaches should focus on the process, on where athletes went right or wrong, and then work on that, and that's what your elite coaches, your elite athletes do. They focus on the process, and if you're able to focus on the process, if you're able to care about the process every time, generally the results tend to follow. Now, winding down though, so that's essentially when athletes should wind down after an event or a competition, and that requires experimentation. Like, for example, how many days do they take off, or how many or exactly what do they do in order to wind down. So that can include deep sleeping, it can include having rest days, it can include reading. And Dimitri's Mighty Mouse Johnson, who was a flatweight world Grand Prix champion, he played video games to unwind after a race. Amazing. That brings us to our inquiry question 4. How does the acquisition of skill affect performance? So skill acquisition happens in 3 stages. There is cognitive, there is associative, and there is autonomous. So the way I like to remember it is that cognitive is mental, the first one. So this is where we are essentially spending a lot of time just sort of mentally grasping the process, and grasping the process and feeling confident with it. Then associative is practicing. This is where we actually practicing and starting to apply the concepts that we've learned. And then autonomous is auto. So cognitive is when we have a basic understanding of the game. We want to focus on what movements we have to do, and we make lots of errors. We need to see and feel the movement. This is an exploratory stage, so the best means to learn here is to communicate, to see what did you do right, what did you do wrong, how should you improve your technique in a certain way. And demonstration is also another good way to actually learn. The learning speed here is slow. Movement is generally inefficient because you're still learning how to actually move, and the support from teaching aids, is really crucial. So like coaches, visuals, pictures to actually understand what to do, and then to start to move in that certain way. Associative is your practicing stage. So this is where you are, this is our middle stage, the intermediate stage. So we want to focus on how to do the movement. We want to be able to recognize errors. For example, practicing a kinesthetic movement. Now, demonstrators are also really important at this stage because now they're helping us refine those movements. And there is an emphasis on temporal patterning, so smooth movement. So now, because we've been, let's say, doing it for a while, we're starting to get a hang of it and we're starting to get good at it. Now we are, making those mental connections so that it becomes so that it becomes, more automatic. It starts to become more automatic. Obviously, you won't get there in this stage, but you start to gain a better understanding subconsciously and obviously mechanically as well. It is done at a moderate speed generally and reasonably efficient. So you may still be making moderate errors. However, improvement requires practice in set patterns of controlled situations. So you are now practicing more, but you're still doing it in a controlled situation. You're not doing it in in like a game or competition situation. However, you are now starting to put it into practice. Our autonomous stage is the advanced stage. This is where the focus is on the entire movement. So we make minimal to no errors here, and we want to detect minor mistakes and also self-correct immediately. So by now we should have a good I guess mechanical kinetic is a word, kinetic understanding of the movement. So every time, if you do something wrong, it feels wrong and you're able to correct it. So now we also start to adapt to different pressuring situations, and we rehearse under varying circumstances as well, varying conditions. So the movements are refined. Temporal patterning is automatic, and speed and efficiency are on point with the game or competition. So that will then lead to that improvement requires a manipulation of environment for precision. So we're now starting to sort of get a better understanding of the environment, how to move, how to actually respond to certain and how to actually respond to certain stimuli as well while you're playing and while you're now adapting to the different aspects of the game. So again, at this stage, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Again, with these questions generally in the papers, you would see, like for example, in some of the multi-choice, they would give you like an example, like this is an athlete, they are using, videos to learn right now, and they're getting constant feedback. What level of skill acquisition are they at? And from that sort of information, and they'll give you a bit more, but you generally be able to tell, okay, they're using videos, they are getting lots of feedback, they are making mistakes, they're probably at a cognitive level. But if they were like, they are making some mistakes, they are starting to adapt in a game environment, but they're still getting feedback on how to improve movement from coaches, then I would sort of say, okay, they're getting feedback, but now they're starting to practice in different environments, and and that would kind of give it away as associative and so on. So multi-choice questions can definitely give you that. And you can obviously also get questions outright asking you what is the difference between cognitive, or rather, what are the 3 stages of skill acquisition? Give characteristics of each. That's also a very popular question. So let's have a look at the characteristics of a learner. So essentially, learning how to acquire certain motor skills, it depends on each athlete. Everyone learns differently, everyone moves differently, everyone has a different, obviously, way of thinking about things. So every learner will have different characteristics, and no two athletes will acquire the same skill at the same pace. Some, may pick up really fast, but then take time to adapt to different situations. Some may take time to actually learn the skill, but then be really good at technically adapting it. So everyone learns differently. Now, what are the characteristics that can sort of that contribute to a learner being able to learn a skill, or to being able to learn a skill? Is firstly personality. So an individual's characteristic, so that's essentially an individual's way of behaving. Traits like consistency, being reliable, being motivated are traits that can, obviously, if someone has it, like their personality, when you say someone's got a good personality, they're like really reliable, really motivated. An athlete that is really reliable and motivated, you can clearly tell that they would be resilient with learning a skill. You can't necessarily say that they'll be really good at learning a skill, really fast at it. We can say that they will be resilient at it. Some are more favorable than just the physical talent, like, having positive learning attitudes, like enthusiasm, dedication, willingness to learn and try, resilience. So more receptive that an athlete is to instructions and feedback to advice. It also would make the cognitive process easier and faster for them, because they are trying to learn and pick up things really fast. Heredity. So heredity is inherited from parents, inherited from your ancestors, and people can acquire skills quickly and perform well despite not being physically suited to a sport. So that can happen. They can pick skills, they can really work hard at them to acquire them, although competition may suffer. So for example, a sure high jumper can still perform well, but they still would have that disadvantage of not being able to reach as far as someone who is taller than them. So that's hereditary. That is how, that dictates how they would go at the sport. Now, fast and slow twitch muscle fibers, which we have just looked at then, they also can influence success. So the higher percentage of fast twitch muscle fibers, the higher success you would have in sprinting, because you have those high twitch muscle fibers which are more suited to sprinting and, to explosive movement in comparison to slow twitch muscle fibers. Now, gender also can affect that, so male versus female competitions. Height and weight are also different characteristics, so height and weight can provide considerable advantage to some players, and it can make associative stage easier as well. So conceptual ability, this is where the ability to visualize movement in the first stage, and being able to again, visualize and see yourself in that moment. Somatotype is another one that refers to the characterization of the human physique. For example, mesomorphs, they are muscular and they have low body fat, and that kind of physique is good for an AFL player or a bodybuilder. Okay, now looking at confidence. So, in terms of confidence, a firm self-belief is critical to improvement and develops from experiencing success in learning situations. So, this is where we are considering, this is where we're sort of considering how, essentially, failures and mistakes should be presented as learning opportunities, and confident people are able to help themselves and they're able to help others as well. So we want to so essentially, a confident learner will approach challenges with knowing that they'll be okay, and even if, for example, they don't win or things don't go their way, they'll still be okay because they'll learn something from it, they'll take something away nonetheless. prior experience. So prior experience, this is where we're actually looking at how prior experience in a similar or a different sport, or maybe, you know, a sport in general in comparison to someone who hasn't played sports, that can help like that player. So it's easy to learn from new movements if similar movements have already been learned, and there is a potential to actually accelerate the learning process. If you've already learned similar movements, you can transfer those skills over and be able to more efficiently learn those skills and move through the skill acquisition process. So lateral skill is when one task is similar to another. For example, a background in tennis is similar to a backhand in tennis is similar to a backhand in squash. So you'll be able to pick that up quite quickly. You know, if you played tennis, you should be able to pick up a backhand in squash faster than someone who hasn't played squash and is learning tennis for the first time. Vertical transfer is when we are mastering a low order task to then complete a harder task. For example, kicking with a kickboard to then practice freestyle. Now, ability. So the ability of a learner is the way in which an individual is able to learn, process, and implement new skills. And this incorporates like a large range of factors like acuity, having sharpness, perception, reaction time, intelligence. So everyone has different abilities. Everyone will use and express that differently. So this is where you're kind of referring to an athlete's general competence in the skill, sport, or exercise in general. And learning a new, and sometimes, if someone who is competent in the sport, who's able to pick things up fast, who's perceptive, they may be able to learn new skills faster and actually speed up in reaching the associative level of learning. Now, capacity to read a game. This is where athletes can view things before they happen. And more precise, and this is where the anticipation, if you have the ability to sort of start anticipating things from that cognitive learning level, you'll be able to progress through to the autonomous level faster. And then at the autonomous level, you would have already developed that skill of being able to adapt in new situation. So yeah, we're more precise in skill execution as they can refine movements more thoroughly and helps athletes readily execute the required skill, which results in them having greater ability as well. So let's have a look at the different performance elements. We've got decision making versus strategic and tactical development. So decision making refers to the various decisions that an athlete will make, in the course of the game, the event, in the career, and essentially they are, when we are practicing decision making, before an event, before a competition, we want to replicate the game, and that is how we will best improve it, by replicating the game and the conditions. So how do we actually achieve it? We achieve it through observation, like coaching boards and demonstrations to reveal the thought processes of strategies. Also observing through watching highly skilled players. That's something that a lot of young players would do who are just starting out, is by watching skilled players, watching and reading about them to sort of see how they approached a certain game, a certain situation in the game. Questioning is another one. So this is where we are highlighting options and working through them. We can ask questions like, what do you do if? Or what do you do if this happens? Or what do you do if that happens? How do you actually best respond to this situation? So whole part, whole approach. So whole part, whole approach is one way in which we kind of look at the game plan is taught as a whole to then see the overall strategies, and then we break down into smaller skills. So I'm just going to grab a tissue. Okay, I have to open a new box. It's not opening. That's okay. But yeah. So this is where we essentially questioning, and then we do the whole approach thing where we look at the big game plan and we break it down into how do we actually apply those skills. How do we learn those skills? Okay. Variations. So players are encouraged to explore innovative and imaginative options, like changing defensive alignment. Yeah, and then finally creativity. So encourages all players to identify problems and solve it as a group. So all of those distinct decision making processes like observation, questioning, whole approach, variation, and creativity, that can really help obviously teams, that can really help that can really help, also with like the motivation of the game as well. If you've been following the Ashes, you may see some similarities between this and maybe the Boz Bowl approach that England took in the first test. The second test is going on as we speak. Yeah, but like that was quite interesting, hey? So the way in which you declare on the first day of the test match. I mean, they scored all right, but you generally, like test like most teams would go the traditional way of, batting through to the second day, getting 500, 600 runs because they were doing all right. They may would have gotten to 400, 500 at the most. But yeah, like that's quite interesting to see how players are able to to try changing their defensive strategy to a more attacking strategy, and that is something that athletes, even those at the autonomous level, will continue to do in order to adapt to the best of their game. Strategic and tactical development. So this is where the overall method used to achieve a goal, and we are gaining an advantage over the competitor. That is kind of what we want to do, and we do that by improving our technical efficiency, understanding the game, and also having good execution of the skill. So players who understand the game and how it works are better in various situations, and they're more successful in executing strategy as well. Now, strategy and tactics, they have to be practiced to ensure that the timing is correct and the execution is smooth as well. So this is the associative stage where we're now looking at gaining a better understanding of strategical and tactical precision, and focusing on timing, focusing on movements being sharp. Now, strategy and tactics, they need to be clear, and each player needs to know what their role in and how to execute it well. So if I go to my earlier example of the Ashes, the first match, England chose to bat after they won the toss, I believe. And how every player knew that they had to sort of be attacking, not defending. So we start the first ball of the match with a 4, which was really cool because the last Ashes started with a duck. The first ball was out. Amazing one, by the way. It was Mitchell Starc. I can't remember who the player was, but I can't remember, but the first ball was out. This time England started with a 4 instead, so that was pretty cool. Obviously for them. But yeah, it's sort of that stage, and then everyone in the team knew that they had to bat aggressively. There was definitely some very interesting shots, very aggressive, a very head-on strategy as well. And that's something that we see in all sports played at the highest level, is that each team member knows what to do, they knows what is expected of them, what the strategies of the game, and how to actually approach that and make good decisions in regards to that. So for example, changing the player system in soccer from 3-3-4 to 4-3-3. So that can, again, depending on the situation of the game as well. So we have different practice methods as well. So we've got massed practice, which is more practice. There's continuous sessions with smaller rest periods. So we work, and this generally works for skilled and motivated athletes, like for example passing in soccer. So you're continuously doing that. Obviously, this fatigue is a factor in this. Boredom is another factor in this, but your more motivated and skilled athletes are able to um, you know do continuous sessions with smaller rest periods. Distributed practice means decreased practice, so shorter periods of practice with longer breaks. And this is where it can be a rehearsal for another skill, or for a break, or even for feedback. And essentially what we're doing is that by sort of doing different things in the decreased practice and doing distributed things, it can allow us to improve on more skills, or to take a break in between, or to actually get some valuable feedback. Okay, you did this right, you now need to focus on this, and so on, and be able to improve those different aspects of the game. And this is often done for less skilled and less motivated athletes. So athletes that would get, and this is usually in the cognitive stage where you're just learning the skill. So you would get demotivated quite quickly if you don't get it. So this is where we're going different things and we're switching it up each time. So you get feedback, you do something else. You get feedback, you do something else. Then you may come back to the first thing that you did. Hopefully you will apply that feedback and then move on. Apply that feedback, move on. And it's that changing the feedback, and the change in pace that would be more beneficial for that less motivated athlete. Now, it is helpful to teach boring skills. For example, passing in basketball. Doing it in a distributed way. Like for example, you pass a basketball for 10 minutes or something. Then you focus on dribbling. Then you may be focusing on breaking up a layup. Maybe that will come later. But generally, the point here is that we want to break down the more boring skills so that the athlete doesn't get bored. They don't lose focus. They don't become less motivated to play. So whole versus part practice. So whole refers to when we are doing the skill in its whole version, right? Versus using discrete. It's used for discrete and continuous skills. So for example, it's good for teaching swimming or running. So we're doing the whole thing together. It's continuous. For swimming, you're not gonna sort of break you're not going to break a stroke up into different parts. You have to do it as a whole. You have to do it continuously. So this works for when the technique is whole, the movement is whole. Part by part works for skills that can be broken down into different pieces. So you can break it down, learn them each individually efficiently, and then bring it back together. So each part is practice in isolation, and it can be used to teach serial skills like a layup in basketball, for example. Any questions so far? Again, I'll be live on the chat, so please ask any questions that you have. No question is a silly question. And while we're on the chat, I'll also see if I can put up some questions as we're going through these slides. Okay, the nature of a skill. So a skill can be open. So it can be done in a changing environment that is open to the weather, that is open to, for example, the conditions on the ground, like tackling in a rugby league, or for example in cricket, the conditions are open to the state of the pitch. Closed is when the skill is happening in a controlled environment, like a gymnast performing a floor routine. The environment is controlled. They are going to be on, the conditions will always be similar. So there's no outside, for example, influences in that. No changing of weather, no changing of conditions as well. So it's closed. Self-paced, on the other hand, is when a skill is controlled by the athlete, like if they're throwing a javelin in athletics. So it's controlled by the athlete. They choose when they're ready to when they're ready to throw the javelin, how much they want to move, and so on. So the control is with them. Externally paced is when outside factors control the skill. So essentially this is when, like in games where you have to react to something happening. Example is returning a serve in tennis. So when you serve in tennis, you're doing the first serve, it's soft-paced. You choose when to throw, where to throw. But if you are returning a serve in tennis, it's the outside factors that are controlling the skill. You have to watch what the other person's doing, where they're hitting, and then move accordingly. Same thing with cricket. If you are a batter, you are reacting to the ball. You're reacting to when it's coming, where it's coming, and how you're going to how you're going to react to it. What sort of shot is best for it. Finally, gross is when a gross skill is essentially when it is using large muscle groups. So large muscle groups are involved in the whole thing. For example, in running, your arms, legs, essentially pretty much the whole body is involved. Fine skills. These are skills that use small muscle groups to move, like throwing a dart or archery. Or shooting as well. So small muscle groups, they're very fine motor skills as well. Serial, they refer to when there are many types of complex skills that make up the whole movement. So for example, bowling in cricket, the run up, the arm movement, the letting go of the ball, the wrist movement as well. So all of that, it's a complex skill. It can be broken down into different parts. Discrete is when a move has a defined beginning and an end, like a golf swing. So there's a defined beginning, you hit, like you pull it back and then you hit, and there is a defined end. However, a continuous skill is like the opposite of that. So there, when the skill is repeated, so there's like no end or beginning, but it's just sort of repeated, it's ongoing, like swimming. So you can see that they're like all sort of opposites of each other. So open versus closed, self-paced versus externally paced, gross versus fine, serial versus discrete, and then continuous. Sorry, fine versus serial, and gross versus fine, and then serial, and then discrete versus continuous. So essentially, with this you can get questions that ask you in the syllabus to sort of define what the movement is. Like it can give you a prompt that a tennis player is returning a serve, and so on, which movement is it. And it can sort of be like, is it open or closed, and the multi-choice options can be like open, self-paced, closed, externally paced, open, externally paced, and then you choose the right one. In this case it would be open because it's changing to the environment, and externally paced. Amazing. Again, any questions, please ask away. So let's have a look at performance measures. So there are objective versus subjective performance measures. Now, an objective performance measure is independent of the observer. The measurement is done using something other than the person observing. So this is where we have like a quantitative way to measure the thing. Sometimes it can be made objective by checklist or established criteria. For example, in gymnastics, in dancing, where it's more subjective, that's where we can use checklists to make it more objective. So but like generally in sports like running, stopwatch, measuring tape in like your measuring tape in long jump and so on, they are quantitative measures. So in a 400-meter sprint, the runners are measured objectively by a timer. Now, subjective is when it depends on the observer. So it is based on feelings, opinions, and impressions. So it's obviously we prefer objective because it's more fair in comparison to subjective. Now, this is where we are relying on the observer versus independent measures. For example, divers tend to use more subjective performance elements in order to give those marks, in comparison to like 400-meter sprint as well. And even with like, you know, gymnastics and stuff, there are checklists to make it more objective, but there's definitely a level of subjectiveness in it as well. So with basketball, objectively the ball went in the hoop, but subjectively it was a result of poor positional defense. Gymnastics objectively scored a 7.0 in their floor routine, however subjectively it lacked creativity. And then swimming objectively completed the 500-meter race in 32.7 seconds. 50-meter race in 32.7 seconds, but subjectively the slower time was caused by a faulty breathing technique. So there's definitely aspects of both objectivity and subjectivity when it comes to performance measures as well, but sports do tend to, you know, try and make things objective. So having a look at validity and reliability when it comes to these tests. So validity refers to accuracy. You know, we want to measure. So it tests the ability to measure what it's supposed to measure. So a test, a competition, it should measure what it needs to measure, and it also looks at the strength of relationship between measured skill and the test conducted. So validity is enhanced if known good performance. Validity is enhanced if known good performers perform better than the bad performers. That tells us that, you know, generally some people are the bad performers, some athletes are really good. We can tell that the test is reliable if we sort of see that being replicated, that the good performers are performing really good versus the bad performers not performing as good. So a beep test is a really good example for it. I'm sure we all remember it from our primary days. I think you still do it in high school up until like year 8, year 9. I don't know, that was my experience anyways, not a huge fan. But a beep test is supposed to measure cardiovascular endurance, and it is valid in predicting the VO2 max. However, using a VO2 max test instead will be more accurate. And you would see with something like beep test, you know it's reliable because the kids that always get out at the beginning will get out, and the ones that tend to last through will last through. Always the sporty ones, hey. Yeah, I was definitely the ones that got out at the beginning. No regrets there. Reliability is when we are looking at precision. So a test has to be reliable. It has to be consistent. That is the sort of the key here. And it's the ability of the scorer to produce the same result each time. So I'm going to maybe try and use my pen to draw a diagram that always helps me understand reliability versus validity. So if we've got like a bullseye here, okay, just excuse my circle, everyone. Now if every time let me draw 2 of them, I'm going to try and draw them the same. Oh, look at that. Okay, so let me change my ink color. Okay, so a test is valid if every time you are, so this is a target, if every time you are sort of getting here, 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 you know, like getting to the target, that's a valid test. So this is every time. It's generally always here, but some, you know, tests, they can sort of be around as well, but it's generally every time you're hitting the main point here that you need to hit. However, so that's a valid test. Now, a reliable test is if you're hitting the side, but you're always hitting this side. You're always hitting far away from it. Oh, ignore that. You're always hitting there, but like you're hitting the same spot every time. This means that the test is not valid. It's not testing what it's supposed to test, but it is reliable because you're getting the same results each time. Same results, but not testing what it's supposed to test. So the test is reliable, but it's not valid. This test is valid just imagine that these black dots are like really close to the thing. My drawing is just not gonna get there today, so just imagine. Yeah, so this tells me that the test is valid and it's reliable because I'm getting where I need to, and it's consistent every time. Now I'm gonna venture to draw one more bullseye. Again, I apologize to put you guys through my horrible drawing, but I think this just always helps me understand the validity versus reliability concept. Now, if... Okay, here we go. Not bad. Okay. Oh, jinxed myself. There we go. Alrighty. Now, if you've got this, let me just get a pen, just change its color to black. Okay, now if you've got yeah, so this test is valid, it's reliable. This test is not valid, but it's reliable. So that's the difference between the two: valid and reliable, not valid and reliable. And you wouldn't see a valid not reliable, because like, yeah, because for example, it would hit in the middle here. That tells us it's reliable. But for example, if it's like all over the place, for example, this test is not valid and honestly wouldn't be reliable either, because it's not hitting the center all the time and it's not reliable. So there's a much better diagram online if you actually search up validity versus reliability, with like perfectly drawn bullseyes and really nicely drawn points to actually show you what's happening. But this is my way, I guess, of showing you that this test is valid, this test is reliable, this test honestly is not valid equals not valid or reliable. Okay, so yeah, so and there's another example there. So a shuttle run is a reliable agility test. A shuttle run is a reliable agility test if the same tester produces the same results with the same athlete under those same conditions. Okay, amazing. Let's move on then to criteria. So there is personal versus prescribed criteria. So personal criteria refers to presuppositions, so preconceived ideas or expectations that an individual brings to judge a performance. And assessments are based on feelings and impressions over assigned criteria. This is where it's an individual's assumptions, their preconceived ideas that play a huge role into the criteria. So examples when so it's used by coaches when selecting their players, right? So some coaches can be partial to some players, like some players more than others. And spectators use personal criteria when evaluating dance performances. Some people may like a certain song and how the performers dance to it, in comparison to someone not liking the song and as a result not liking the performers either. So for example, if a person walks out of their ballet concert thrilled with their performance versus a person feeling disappointed. Prescribed criteria. This refers to the established criteria which is created by the sporting body, and it is used to appraise performers consistently for all their athletes. So often comes in the form of a checklist or a rating system, and it helps objectify subjective measures. So the more detailed and stringent criteria, the better the objectivity and reliability is. So you cannot always achieve 100% objectivity, but you can try and achieve let's say 95% objectivity by making the criteria really stringent. An example is checklist for gymnastics to actually score each routine. So putting up PE pens to paper. That means we have gone through the content for core 2. If you guys have any questions, please ask away. I hope that was easy to understand and that all of that made sense. We're now going to do a couple of questions, and I'm going to walk you through the answers, the process, and share some tips along the way. but please feel free to ask any questions that you may have regarding PD, regarding study tips, regarding any of the course or the electives. So, when it comes to multiple choice, I honestly find the best way to go about doing it is to read, cross out, underline, or highlight. So what that means is you start off by reading the question carefully. Sometimes, you are nervous when you go into that exam room. You don't feel like you're gonna smash it out. I mean, you may go in feeling like I'm ready, but generally it's like, oh, okay, this is a bit nerve-wracking. You may feel nervous despite feeling okay, despite feeling confident, but nonetheless, it can happen, things happen, you can have that foggy brain moment for a second where you just don't read the question carefully. So read the question carefully, be very conscious about it, say every word like loud out in your head, not in the exam room, in your head. Then read every single answer, highlight the keywords in every single answer, and then cross out the incorrect or the incorrect part of the question. So it may not always be like evident from the get-go which one's correct, which one's not correct, but try and cross it out from the get-go. Like there'd be that one question, like that one answer that's always blaringly wrong, another one that's definitely like 75% wrong, and then there are two questions, and then the two generally options left. One is like the right one is like really close to right, but there's something going on in the answer there. So you want to cross out the two of them, the two obviously wrong ones, and then think about which one is it between the remaining two, and like cross out the incorrect part of one of them, and hopefully that will leave you with the right question, so with the right answer. So have a go with this question. This is one of the HSC questions. Which type of cancer are people who work outside most at risk of developing? So I'm going to give you 2 seconds to think about it. Okay, so firstly, we can eliminate bowel cancer because that doesn't really have much to do with being outside, so you can eliminate bowel cancer. Then think about it, breast cancer can also go. Again, being outside, not as much genetic factors play a huge role in breast cancer, and also like lifestyle factors and age and so on. Then you can eliminate cervical cancer as well, because again, not much to do with being outside, it's more so genetic and hereditary and lifestyle too. So that leaves us with one, which is skin cancer, and that would be the right answer. So when it comes to short answer questions, look at the directive term. So understand the verb. What is it asking you? If it's asking you to what extent, give a quantified judgment, to a significant extent, to a great extent, to lesser extent, to a medium extent. Describe would then ask you to give if the question is describe, give me the characteristics and the features. If it's outline, sketch in general terms. So look at the directive term. Then look at what part of the syllabus it comes from. With PDHPE, one of the main pathways to success is to know the syllabus really, really well. Like with PD questions, especially your higher marks questions, sometimes they're literally just one whole dot point and you have to talk about everything in that dot point. And that's you have to remember what comes underneath each one and give lots of examples. So know your syllabus, know what is underneath every dot point, and then be able to give examples. Then look at the mark allocation, right? And that will help you determine how much you actually sort of need to write. So in a very, very general generalization, like a very big generalization, is go 1 mark is 3 lines. It's very general, but that's sort of about it. Maybe 2.5 lines, but I think that's sort of a good general indicator to go by. And the number of lines that they give you is usually the amount that they expect you to write, but you can definitely go more if need be, but obviously don't spend too much time on your 3-4 markers and then ignore your ignore your 7, 8, 9 markers. So let's have a look at this question. Describe the determinants of health that affect a preventable condition in Australia other than cancer. So in this case, let's start off by firstly looking at what the directive term is. It's describe. So we need to give the characteristics and features of the determinants of health. Then identify the determinants. So those determinants would be sociocultural, socioeconomic, and geographical. Identify a preventable condition other than cancer. So you can use the others that are listed in the syllabus. Some include CVD, mental health, diabetes, injuries, and other ones. So you can use any of those. And then clearly describe how the determinants impact the prevalence and incidence of the condition. So this is where we need to link the determinants to actually the prevalence and incidence of that condition that you have chosen. And it's 4 marks. So another rule that I kind of like to follow is for every mark, aim for about, for per mark, aim for about 2 minutes. And I think that's a good sort of general rule to follow. It means you would have plenty of time at the end to go back and check your paper. But yeah, again, like it's personal, like a generalized thing, but you can obviously go to the paper, calculate, like it's a 3-hour exam. It's 3-hour exams, 180 minutes, 100 marks, and you can do the sort of the calculation there. Awesome. So in extended responses, have an intro sentence. Doesn't have to be fancy, just make sure you understand the question, the syllabus, and you're providing a direct answer to the question. Your opinion matters, get straight to the point, you don't have to waffle, and do not limit yourself early. So 1 to 2 intro sentences are more than enough, generally 1's enough. Let's have a look at this. This is an example response. So mental health is a preventable condition affecting many Australians. Now this tells me what condition I'm looking at other than cancer. Straight to the point. Sociocultural determinants include the influence of peers, media, and societal pressures. So now that's telling you what the sociocultural determinants are. For many women, body image influences their feeling of self-confidence and happiness. They often feel pressured to diet as a result of the media images and expectations to look thin. This need for society and peer acceptance leads to young women feeling anxious, and in some cases leads to anorexia and bulimia as a result of their low sense of self-worth. Young men living in rural isolated communities can also suffer from depression. Increasing rates of male suicide are in part due to the lack of appropriate support services located in rural areas. This environmental determinant is caused by living in a remote location, leading to social isolation. So now I'm talking about the geographical determinant, and not being able to access appropriate health services. Example, headspace. So give examples. Do not miss out on examples. When they're struggling to manage their mental health, is detrimental for young rural men. So we've got a definition and identification sentence. We have identification and explanation of those determinants. We also have examples and links to the condition. So that is really important. You want to be able to go, this is what happened, this is why it's happening. And that's that. So for your extended responses body paragraphs, method 1 is using syllabus dot points. I think that's a really good method to go by. So short paragraphs explaining the dot points connected to the syllabus. Method 2 can be to use examples, like using different sports as a way to propel your arguments. That would work for this core, not as much for core 1, but again, it would depend. But I liked method 1 the most. And then you can also look at it through the lens of athletes and individuals who are suffering health condition as well. That also works. Okay, extended responses. So when it comes to conclusions, straight to the point, 1 to 3 sentences max. Include a summary of the points you've discussed, and address the question. Sorry, it's so light. Address the question by connecting back to it. You need to connect back to the question, and that's really important. My general tips: read the multiple choice questions as soon as you get into the room. Well, when the reading time starts. In the reading time, make sure you read the elective questions too. Remember, you're only doing the 2 that you've studied, and make sure when you do them, you write down on the paper the question you're answering. Never spend too much time on one section. Watch the clock, watch your handwriting. Really annoying, but you have to. Make sure you understand the verb, and remember to stay with contemporary data and examples. So aim for about last 5 years, and then breathe. You'll be okay. Have some fun. It is your last year of high school, and you guys are going to smash it out. And that brings me to an end for today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. It was lovely. I really had a lot of fun going through this with you. I hope you had fun. I hope you found it helpful. Please ask lots of questions, and if you have any more questions, feel free to ask. And I will see you guys at the next series. Thank you so much for tuning in. Good luck. You're going to smash it together. You're going to smash it. We're here to help. Have a lovely rest of the holiday. Don't forget to take some time to rest and to recuperate before you get into your trial study. So thank you guys so much. I will see you guys next time around. Best wishes. Good luck. Take care. Thank you. Take care.